Welcome back. These are this week's talking points alongside Saffie Osborne, Ralph Beckett and Alan Johns. A real mix this week. We are going to start with the remaining fallout from the Randox Grand National last week and, of course, the sad death of Celebre D'Allen. Clearly, in and of itself, an extremely regrettable outcome, but within that, a whole raft of subjects to debate. Alan Johns, first of all, let's talk a little bit about whether the horse should have been in the race in the first instance and whether you think 13-year-olds might not be able to run in the race in future.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I think, in theory, bringing in rules like that might seem quite straightforward, but when you look at individual cases, you know, you might have a Grand National trial winner at Haydock next year who's 13 and then can't go and run in the Grand National. You know, how would those owners and trainers feel? And I was convinced with Mr. Incredible that he shouldn't take his place in the race before he was excluded from the race. He was then excluded. Sandy Thompson came on your podcast and explained that, you know, from his point of view, the owner's point of view and all these sort of things. And all of a sudden I thought, oh, crikey, it's not quite as straightforward as that. So difficult for the BHA to play God too much, I think, in this situation. I'm not sure.
It's been a very interesting week for the sport in this regard, Rafe, because you got a horse who looked in some distress, showed some signs of recovery, went home, subsequently died at home. And it struck me that whilst it's wrong of animal rights campaigners to use a single issue on which to hang their case, it's similarly wrong of horse racing to be too triumphalist when a horse appears to recover, given the fact that anything could happen 2 days later.
Yeah, I think Graham Cunningham makes this point regularly, is that, you know, it's become such that the Grand National is a huge success if nothing dies, and it's a disaster if something does, and that's a problem.
You can't frame it in that way.
In that context.
If you want it to sustain.
There's no way to sustain it. And so we have to move away from that. And how you know, that's a problem for everybody.
Saffie, we talked a little about the Scottish National at the beginning of the programme, and Alan and I were saying, as people who love and watch jump racing every day, as I know you do, it was actually quite hard to watch, harder than the Grand National itself. And I very rarely say that about a horse race.
Yeah, and obviously coming from someone in racing, it was an extremely hard watch, as you said. I think I watched the first circuit, and luckily I was going out to ride, so walked away from the telly. So yeah, it's quite hard to defend that to sort of the average person that knows nothing about racing.
And as for the National itself, and the question of the extent to which a fatality will dictate whether the race was deemed a success or not, how do you feel about that and the narrative around it?
As obviously Rafe said, that's unsustainable, because you've got also, it's that horrible thing of you've got the sort of animal rights activists almost willing a horse to die so that they can have something to shout about. And I think if this is every year and it's becoming sort of more and more testing in the modern day society to defend it, I think.
And what about the communication of fatality and injury, Rafe? There was a very interesting piece from Martin Samuel early in the week that was talking about not covering up a potentially serious injury to Broadway Boy at Valentine's and not showing it in the ITV replay and as, to use his word, being coy about what's happened. To what extent do you think we need a bit more front, sensible front, but a bit more front in that regard?
I agree. I mean, you know, you need to own it. You know, and they need to, you know, the horse fell, he's all right. We don't know whether he's all right yet or not, but we'll keep you informed as to whether he is, and be upfront about it. Running away is not going to solve anything. And the sport has done far too much of that over the last decade. None of us can forget that Henry Oliver got fined for waving his arms at the start to get his horse to jump off at Uttoxeter, however many, 8 or 9 years ago. You know, the sport's got to own you know, they're jumping obstacles and there are going to be fallers, you know, and, you know, it's not a sport for for boys in short trousers. You know, you've got to and own that and not be worried about it, in my view.
I think, you know, with other sports, you look at football, if somebody sustains an injury, they don't, and it's nasty, they don't always show the replay. I didn't see the ITV coverage of it, but I think it sounded like they...
I should be clear.
He wasn't injured.
The production decision here was not to show Valentine's as well, on the assumption that Broadway Boy was seriously injured. So I'm certainly not going to throw ITV under the bus without throwing our own production team under the bus.
To me, personally, I in that situation, I would have skipped the replay of that jump and explained that we're not going to show it for the privacy of the horse, and because it's
still being treated,
yeah, and all that sort of stuff. But owning that in the process, I'm not actually sure of how they worded it or whether they just cut to the next frame. I'm not sure, so I couldn't say too much there.
Yeah, just cut to the next frame. Well, the debates will continue, no doubt, about the Grand National, and Celebre D'Allen's a horse who has given his connections an awful lot of pleasure down the years, and I'm sure he will be very fondly remembered by all of them. Baroness Batters is Minette Batters. If you're involved in horse racing, you may know her as a point-to-point rider from the previous generation. You may know her also as a director of Salisbury Racecourse. She was president of the National Farmers Union, and she is now the government-appointed czar to consult on the government's relationship with farmers, which broke down over the inheritance tax row. And Rafe, you were quoted in a piece today, this week in the Times, saying that you know she was, or you quoted the article of the Times announcing her appointment, saying she's good enough for the government now, but apparently wasn't good enough to make the shortlist for chair of the BHA.
Yeah, I mean, how is that? So somebody who was a stable girl, worked for David Ellsworth and James Toller, is a racecourse director, and obviously did a good job with the NFU. You heard Charles Allen in the... you heard David Jones in the NTF AGM said, we appointed Charles Allen because he was the standout candidate, full stop. He has good relations with government. Clearly, Minette Batters did, but Minette applied for the job and wasn't interviewed. I mean, that's barely credible, is not?
And in terms of what you think the BHA were looking for in their new chair, can you intuit what they were driving at, what they wanted? They wanted perceived strong links with.
The job was advertised. The job was advertised for somebody who knew about the sport. That was in the job application. I don't think Lord Allen knows anything about the sport. Those who know him say he knows nothing about the sport. But
reports are that he's going to come in and he has very strong ideas about
regulations,
how the sport might be governed.
Yeah.
OK. Minette Batters was not on the shortlist for BHA chair, has the governing body missed a trick, as she now takes up a role consulting this government on their farming policy. Weighing rooms has been a key story this week. So many racecourses have not met the schedule laid down for them by the BHA as regards improvements in their facilities, and particularly in facilities for female riders. We're going to take a little while to talk about this. Saffie, your friend and former colleague Hayley Turner has been pretty vociferous about this. She basically said, I shut my mouth for 20 years and said the right thing and did the right thing, and now actually it's time to say not good enough, filthy dirty, not being done in time. How do you feel about it?
I think the key is that these facilities were made when there wasn't many female riders riding, and now there's plenty of us, and there's some weighing rooms that are no bigger than a storage cupboard. Especially when you get amateur races on cards, lots of female amateurs, and I'll turn up for sort of my day's racing and nowhere to sit, nowhere to put any of my stuff, and I just think just a lot of even just sort of the cleanliness in some of them is pretty atrocious. But yeah, I just don't think they fit in with modern day society.
And it's as simple as that. It's not even a question of you having somewhere really fancy to change. It's just some of the pictures that we saw and we've seen this week, it's just gross.
Yeah, it is.
Mould and damp and
the mould and
wet.
the photo of the jockey on the bike in the bathroom, and that is the harsh reality of it, especially with saunas being taken away now. There's jockeys that are having to lose a significant amount of weight at the races, and ways of doing that are cycling, running around the track, but there's nowhere to do it in most of those places. And yeah, I'm fairly used to it. Like, I've turned up to plenty of places in the Middle East, and I don't think they even realised I was a girl. So I've been sort of put in literally in the storage cupboard to get changed. But yeah, in this country, it needs to be better. There is a lot of girls riding now, and they're not really facilitating for it.
And it's not just female changing rooms either, even though they've got an awful long way to come. It's the whole spectrum. Isn't it? I mean, some racecourses have done really well. Others have done much, much less well.
Yeah, I think the changes that a lot of them who have made changes have been great, really, and they have taken that notch up by 5 notches rather than going up by 1. Obviously, a lot needs to be done, and I think the speed at which it's all happening is probably out of sight, out of mind a little bit. I think as jockeys, we come into the weighing room and all you care about is getting rides and riding winners. Mm-hmm. And you come into this environment that has been as it has for how many years, and no one else is talking about it. So you actually get used to it as normal, but it's not normal. It's not really good enough. And it's funny, the week I finished riding, I've seen the front page of the Racing Post with Lorcan Williams with his sweat gear on a bike next to 3 urinals, and I think this is an outrage. And I think, well, I've been...
But you never thought about it at the time.
Not as, I haven't thought about it objectively in that time, but it's just not, it's not up to the standard of the modern world we're living in. And I think I've heard Lydia Hislop talk about it a lot, and I think the speed of change and look, I get it's difficult, and I almost feel for businesses who are needing to spend a lot of money on something that isn't going to earn them money. And some of the quotes they all seem to give, I don't know. I feel like the builders are ripping them off. I don't know, but no, it's obviously a very expensive thing, but it just needs to happen. And I don't know the ins and outs of it, but it's got to get to that point sooner or later, isn't it? When
you look at those pictures, Rafe, that were published in the Racing Post special report on that this week, and we saw the pictures and I reported on them in my podcast, and Tabitha Worsley came on as a very eloquent guest back in December, and nobody took any notice. What do you think? What sort of message does it send about the sort of sport that we're running, do you think?
Well, racecourses don't want to spend the money. That's what it boils down to. Saffie's point about a lot more girls riding. We all remember those huge field lady amateur races. 20 years ago, they were cramming them in to, tiny rooms, and there'd be 15 or 20 girls. I know they're only riding once a day, but still, we all remember that. It's just, it's not difficult, really, is it? They're earning whatever they're up to now, a runner. 1,500 quid a runner or something, aren't they? It's not difficult.
So they just need to get the hand in the pocket, spend the money, and get it on schedule. Right. What sanctions? Because this is where the BHA do have a bit of power in terms of the licensing of racecourses themselves and their ability to actually race according to the rules of British racing. Can the BHA impose greater and stronger sanctions on racecourses that simply don't get their act together and get it done on time?
They've always been able to, Nick. They've just never chosen to.
So is it about time that actually sanctions were
It's not going to happen, though, is it? BHA...
The PJA say our members are simply not going to ride it. You're going to have no jockeys.
Happen, I don't think.
Isn't it?
No, jockeys won't go on strike unless the trainers do. We've already seen that. Look at the crowd and look at... You were at Newbury yesterday.
Good crowd at Newbury yesterday.
Good crowd. Put the money up.
Yeah.
Actually marketed the place. And
amazing how a racecourse can turn around
in 18 months.
Yeah, isn't it?
Yeah. I wish the chairman of Newbury had been there this weekend to watch his racecourse, Phil, and see what his new chief executive had done.
Because the last 6 or 7 years, you and I were discussing yesterday, that fixture's been like a morgue.
Absolutely.
And yet yesterday, And the day before, I know the weather helps, obviously, but I was talking to Sean Hines, the new MD there, or CEO, and he was saying that, you know, they've done a special promotion, 6 postcodes around the Newbury area, and it was a promotion specifically targeted at them, at a populous area, Basingstoke, Reading, right on your doorstep, and Newbury itself. And lo and behold, you get a big local crowd. It's not rocket science, is it?
Absolutely.
But we're back to the weighing rooms. So you can't ever see a situation where you will just say, no, sod this, we're out, unless you can't do it.
No, because there'll always be, like, jockeys are loyal humans to their trainers, and if your trainer says, I need you to ride, you're going to ride. And that's just the reality of it.
The feudal system is alive and well in British horse racing. That's that. Right. Let's talk about amphitheater racing. Well, it's really riffing on a theme here, because amphitheater racing is a fairly newly formed ownership entity, with horses chiefly in training with Scott Dixon. Had a number of runners in the last couple of weeks, 8 or 9 runners. Had a couple of winners at reasonable prices as well. And they are registered in the same offices as ARC, the parent company of many racecourses in this country. And these are essentially, it seems, track horses. So the ownership of the racecourses are intrinsically linked to the ownership of these horses. Now, that's all well and good until such time as you have horses being declared non-runners 3 times, when the declaration of those horses have enforced the division of races at racecourses that are owned by the company that is also intrinsically linked to the ownership of these horses. This is leaving a sour taste in people's mouths, Rafe, for all sorts of reasons. Whether there are any rules being breached here, that's open to debate, and there may not be. But that's not really the point, is it?
No, you know, BHA could choose something about it quite easily, but they're conflicted. You know, the board consists of, is top heavy with racecourse representatives, and you know, the ARC know that they can get away with it because the BHA will do nothing about it.
Just to clarify, the horse Rahila, which is owned by Amphitheater Racing, the declaration of that horse has meant that there were enough runners for 3 races to divide this year, and that horse has been a non-runner all 3 times, withdrawn on a vet certificate. Now, that may be perfectly legitimate, vet certificate, every time, and it may simply be a coincidence. But the point is, even if it is a coincidence, if you were another owner, trainer, somebody, punter, anyone with any kind of involvement in that race, that's not going to appear great to you.
No, it's just more of the same, isn't it? Like, as I said before the break, you know, we haven't reached rock bottom yet.
Is that approaching rock bottom?
It's as low as ARC have gone.
When tracks are owning a bunch of 0 to 55 horses so they can enforce divisions in races and then get paid extra media rights money?
I mean, it's just...
It's very enterprising, isn't it, actually?
It's not enterprising. It's not enterprising.
I'm joking about it.
It's just...
You nearly lit the touch paper there, Alan.
It's not enterprising at all. It's, you know, we're boring our customers to death. You know, is it any wonder that turnover is down? We're boring them to death.
Now, if that weren't enough, what's President Trump going to do to us? And what impact might the US tariffs have on horse export? Well, we've been here before somewhat with Brexit, haven't we? I mean, it's now a lot more expensive to move horses within Europe than it had been. To sell horses, you're paying import tax even if you're buying a horse here and sending it to Ireland, never mind sending it to the United States. What impact is this going to have on the market, or does racing have a merry way of withstanding all this kind of stuff?
I think the sport has as you say, a way of withstanding it. I mean, it'll be interesting to see whether Mike Ryan and those guys come over in the yearling sales to buy the number of horses that they have been for Chad Brown and Klarovich and so on. But I suspect that they'll either find a way around it or they'll leave them here and ship them later. You know, they'll still keep buying, in my opinion. It may not be quite as many, but they'll still come in.
Might it be weirdly to the advantage of...
Could be.
...of British trainers?
Could be.
Might you suddenly find yourself training for a bunch of American owners who don't want to pay the import tax?
And shift them when they've shown some form, or not.
You'll be coming in with your MAGA cap next week. It's all worked out nicely.
Well, I mean, the turf programme in the States is so strong now, and they've got to get the horses from somewhere. So, you know, the obvious place, you know, and they're not going to go to... They're more likely to come to Britain than go to the EU, where it's double the tariff, isn't it?
Yeah. So, who knows? There could be implications. Those implications might well be negative as regards turnover at the sales houses, but who knows, if money is still spent, might end up being weirdly beneficial for domestic trainers. Those were this week's talking points.